This is chapter 29, unit 8 of APUSH. Now this is my 9th time doing the same video of just this one, chapter 29. So let's get into it because I cannot do it a 10th time. Now, Nixon promised to bring Americans together after the turmoil of the 1960s. Nixon fashioned a pragmatic foreign policy that reduced the tensions of the Cold War and announced that he would gradually withdraw U.S. troops from Vietnam and give the South Vietnamese the money, the weapons, and the training that they needed to take over the full conduct of the war, known as Vietnamization. Now, soon after, the Paris Accords promised a ceasefire, and soon the armistice allowed for America to exit the war, and which hurt them greatly. After the war, Nixon laid the foundation for a shift in public opinion towards conservatism and republic gains that would challenge and overthrow the democratic control of Congress. Soon, stagflation appeared, where there were high inflation and high unemployment rate. In August 1971, Nixon surprised the nation by imposing a 90-day wage and price freeze. Next, he took the dollar off the gold standard, which helped devalue the relative foreign currency. This action, combined with a 10% surtax to all imports, improved the UN's balance of trade with foreign competitors and increased the American economy greatly after the Vietnam War. Now, however, Nixon soon goes down in the Burger Court. However, there were two main court cases in the Burger Court. The first one is the court case of Roe v. Wade. This decision, the High Court struck down many state laws prohibiting abortions as a violation of women's right to privacy. The second main court case was Nixon versus America, where Nixon had to hand over his Watergate tapes. Now, the tragedy of Watergate went well beyond public humiliation for Richard Nixon and the conviction and jailing of 26 White House officials and aides. Watergate had a paralyzing effect on the political system in the mid-1970s, a critical time both at home and overseas, when the country needed strong, respected, and confident leader. It became clear that Nixon did not engage in any illegal cover-up to avoid scandal. However, Nixon still resigns, and Gerald Ford steps in and immediately pardons Nixon. Now, however, a loss in Southeast Asia quickly interrupted all of this, and where Saigon officially fell to its communist enemy, now combining North and South into one communist Vietnam country. Quickly, right after that, Jimmy Carter soon took over Ford in the election of 1976, in which he signaled an effort to end the imperial presidency, in which the Carter administration attempted to correct inequities in the original Panama Canal Treaty of 1903 by negotiating a new treaty. However, soon went downhill, where Jimmy Carter saw his most issues. And now, in response to anti-American sentiment, Iranian militants seized the U.S. embassy in Tehran and held more than 50 members of the American staff as prisoners and hostages. The hostage crisis dragged out through the remainder of Carter's pregnancy again? That's like the third time. Presidency in April 1980. Carter approved a rescue mission, but the breakdown of the helicopters over the Iranian desert forced the United States to abort the mission. For many Americans, Carter's unsuccessful attempts to free the hostages became a symbol of a failed presidency. I almost said pregnancy. Count myself. My brain cows are being milked too much. With his presidency going downhill, inflation and loss of popularity would not help much. However, it did happen. But America was changing quickly, and American society transitioned, where immigration grew, and resulted in the Immigration Act of 1965, in which ended the ethnic quota acts of the 1920s, favoring Europeans and thereby opened the United States immigrants from all parts of the world. Following the inflation of immigration, the progression of minority rights arose to gain both relief from discrimination and recognition for their contributions to the U.S. society. One movement was the American Indian movement, which was to achieve self-determination and revival of tribal traditions. Another was a police raid in the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in New York City, sparked both a riot and a gay rights movement. Now, even with all these movements, about 6 or 7 not mean to do that. Another movement was on the rise, which was the environmental movement. In 1970, Congress passed the Clean Air Act and created the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, and followed this legislation in 1972 with the Clean Water Act and the Endangered Species Act of 1973. These movements may have seemed good for American society, changing for the better. However, diverse groups of American society seem to produce more social stress and fragmentation. Combined with a slowing economy and declining standard of living, these forces left many Americans feeling angry and bitter. Now that is the end of chapter 29, unit 8, which is also the end of unit 8. I really hope this helped you guys, and I hope your brains aren't melt as much as mine are after this, because I promise you this is taking way too much time out of my life than I thought it would. Goodbye.